question is asked in a song from many years ago, does anybody really know what time it is? Well, yes, it's time for the fall festivals. And just in just a few more days, we'll be entering into Yom Teruah, Rosh Hashanah. We'll be entering into Yom Kippur, entering into the festival of Sukkot. And please don't get so Sukkot-minded that you're of no Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur good. It is something that people do sometimes, is get a little bit ahead of ourselves and forget that the festivals of Yom Teruah, of Yom Kippur, are very special, and without those, we really miss the meaning of what Sukkot is all about. I will be heading over to Rossville, Georgia, this next Friday. I can't remember what the date is on that. I think it's the 15th. I'll be speaking that evening. Also be with Exodus Road Band, Mishkalim, Howie and Aileen. Looking forward to working with them again. It's been a long time. And my colleague Rico Cortez. So I'll be there Friday night, Saturday morning, be leaving a little early, something I normally don't do from a conference, but I'll be back with our Congregation Life Assembly for the end of Yom Teruah. I'll get my Yoms right there, but a lot going on in these days, and I pray that you're making plans. I want to kind of take a little detour as we begin here. Well, let me take it to a verse, okay? How would that be for an interesting start? And before let me just go there, all right? Verse 14, 15, depending on your translation. Rather, I am making this covenant with both him who is standing here with us today before Yudhe-Vavhe, our Elohim, and also with him who is not here with us today. Let me kind of do a little tweak of the translation there for us. And consider it this way, and also with him who is not here but is here with us today. And what does that do? That shows us that the Father was not, through Moshe, was not just speaking to the Hebrews that were gathered there on the shore of the Yarden, waiting to enter into Jericho, but he was speaking to a people throughout the ages. One of the messages I've been doing with the young adults, the youth, is speaking to them about how the Father sees everything in the present. And so he is able to see that what we consider our past, what we consider our future, is, I believe, one unto him. It is all present. So he can see us being knit together in our mother's womb and see us in the kingdom all at the same time, and we get to walk it out as he's watching it, as he's directing our paths. We get to walk it out. And so he could see that it was not only them standing there hearing the words of Moshe, but it was also us. This is a place that we talk about, that his covenant. You are standing. And go to that place, backing up just a bit. He says to these people who were standing there, and to those of us who were not there but were standing there, that the reason you're standing is because you're to be a witness of the faithfulness of the Almighty. Today, as you and I begin our celebrations of the fall festivals, let us be active in taking a stand against something that is too bad. It's unfortunate that it still is prevalent in many Messianic Hebrew circles, and that is anti-Semitism. You say, well, how could that possibly be? I mean, it's not possible that there can be anti-Semitism. Oh, yes, there is. I was talking with Honok Young just not too long ago, and he was told by someone that had contacted him. I'm going to keep this a little bit incognito here. He was told, I just want you to know why you're not being asked any longer to come back to the congregation that I used to attend. And he said, okay, yeah, what? I've been wondering that. He said, well, because someone in the congregation came up to the leader and said, why is it we have a Jew speaking here? Can you imagine that? I can't. I cannot imagine a person. I mean, to me, a leader, if that was a person that came up to me and said, well, let me give you some reasons, but in the end, if I hear that statement again, you will be the one that is no longer invited here. It won't be our Jewish brothers and sisters. And why am I so adamant about this? Because, ladies and gentlemen, let's face it, probably not a single one of you that's over the age of 20 that may be listening to me today was raised in this walk. Most every one of us were raised in some type of denomination, non-denomination, pseudo-denomination, whatever it is we were raised in. We were raised with a whole list of holidays that are not in this book. We were raised in ways that are, in fact, directly opposed to this book of Scripture. Who is it that through the last 1,700 plus years was responsible for the living of these festivals? Well, it wasn't Constantine. It wasn't Marcion. It wasn't the church fathers. It was not your favorite teacher that you used to have when you were, attending your church. No, it was none of those. But it was the Jewish people. Did I say that I agree with everything that is a Jewish belief? No, I don't. I have some large exceptions to some of the things that are said, but that's fine. But if it was not for the Jewish people who have stood for the last 1,700, well, I mean, we can go back farther than that, 2,000 years. If it had not been for their stand regarding the first 5 books of Scripture, specifically the Torah, we put in there the prophets, the writings, there would have been nothing for us to be restored to. So for anyone who may come in contact with someone that has a bit of an anti-Semitic spirit to them, just remind them that if it was not for those who have stood, we would have no place today to stand. These words are written to us, to each of us, that we are today a witness. And why is it that this restoration of the day, why is it that you and I, as followers of Messiah, probably most people that watch this believe that Yeshua came as Mashiach ben Yosef, the suffering servant, and will return as Mashiach ben David, the conquering king. So what is it about us in this time? It is because if we look in the Torah, in order for truth to be established, there must be more than one witness. There must be, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established. So if we were to say, well, the Jews, Judah is done away with, we are only one witness. If the Jews today are to say, well, Ephraim, the northern kingdom, those who are associated as we are, well, they're not a part of this. And there's only one witness. The truth is, when we come together, when the prayer of Yeshua, that they may be one. Who is he talking about? That they, Jew, former Gentile, when we start the 2 sticks of Ezekiel chapter 37, the 2 houses that are spoken of, when we begin to come together as one, if you go back to Ezekiel 37 and you read these verses, it says that they will turn toward each other. Those 2 sticks of Judah, Ephraim, they will turn toward each other. And let me expound on that as instead of turning our backs on one another, we begin to turn toward each other. We begin to open up a line of communication and of relationships. that we can then begin to learn, exchange ideas from one another, probably never coming to a total agreement on everything. I don't have enough faith for that. The only time that I'm going to agree with anyone is in the kingdom with Messiah. You know, he's somebody mentioned it. I think it was Kathy the other day mentioned it. In the kingdom, I can't remember. It was somebody at Life Assembly. In the kingdom, he's not going to ask for our opinion. In fact, have you noticed he's not asking for our opinion now? So maybe we need to let go of some of those things and understand that he's got this path before us. We should just be blessed. We should be humbled today that we are a people that's called to be standing as a witness before this world. Now it goes in, this chapter goes on in verse 18. I'm going to take a little bit of a spin on this verse. And it says, this is 18:19, depending on your translation. If there is such a person, when he hears, you'll understand this, when he hears the words of this curse, he will bless himself secretly, saying to himself, I will be all right, even though I am stubbornly doing whatever I feel like doing, so that I, although sinful or dry, will be added to the water, the righteous. Not everyone who attends our congregation should we just slap a label on them of redeemed. I remember going to a church, visiting a church many years ago. This is probably prior to, or about the time I started in this walk, maybe. And I remember the pastor pretty much proclaiming that everyone in the congregation was a Christian. And I thought to myself, you know, I'm looking around at people that I just don't see the fruit of that in their lives. It is a tragedy when we just look around the room and assume that everyone that's there knows Messiah, that everyone that's there has a walk with him, has a knowledge, has a deep faith. It's probably not true. I've been in settings recently with one with the youth, with a group. This was at Revive, actually. That a young man who had grown up in this walk, all he knew was this walk. Sorry about that, I had a little camera malfunction in the middle of my sentence. So this young man probably had never tasted pork in his life. Probably had never opened a present around a tree. Had grown up in this walk. And in a time of invitation, one of the people that was there helping us with the meetings went to this young man who was kneeling and in a time of prayer and said, I'm lost. I have no idea who Messiah is. I need Messiah. Wow. That should send chills up and down our spines. That we should never just assume that the person that is sitting beside us has ever really, truly had the gospel explained to them. And maybe it's you that is the one that is being called to explain that to them. Now, we shouldn't go around, you know, in a judgmental attitude toward everybody, thinking, well, I'm the only one in the room that's saved. No, but we should be reaching out and making sure that people understand the reason why they're there. And this brings me kind of, the reason I want to kind of twist this just a little bit or take it to a different place is because of what I saw there at Revive and what I've seen in other places, and what I've seen not only with young adults, but with older adults. I've had the same conversation with adults that have grown up in churches, have gone from, you know, their list of churches is huge. They've gone from this denomination to this one, to this one, to this one. And then they find this Hebrew roots walk, and well, we assume, well, they know what they grew up in church. Maybe they were going from place to place to place because they never heard. They never really heard. Is it possible? Is this the reality of our lives? That a person can go to and attend a church Sunday after Sunday after Sunday and never hear the gospel? I would believe so, because from what they're talking, from what I see in some settings, if they were teaching the gospel, the vast majority would leave. I mean, there are churches here in this town, in Franklin, North Carolina, that if someone were to go and to teach the actual gospel and people respond to it, they'd clear the building out, because they would not be able to stand what is being taught from those pulpits. It's amazing. It's amazing to me when I hear these things. So we need to be, and I want to direct this to parents, to grandparents. Let us, how do I phrase this one? Let us make sure that we're not just thinking that our children and our grandchildren are going to receive Messiah through osmosis. That, well, they grew up in this house, and they were sitting at the Shabbat table, and they know Hebrew, and they know how to make challah bread, and they know how to tie zit, and they know the difference between they know the festivals and all of these things. But let us not assume that we need to be bringing them into what I call a crisis of faith, to where the God of their mom and dad becomes their God. And that can only happen, ladies and gentlemen, that can only happen if you and I know him. You can't pass on a relationship you don't have. So maybe it's our own crisis of faith that we need to be looking at. We need to be considering. Does my belief, my life, is it actually lining up with what is said in here? Now, going on, I'm going to move on from that point. In chapter 30, it's fascinating verses to me. And remember, Moshe is still there he's now in the land of Canaan, but they haven't truly conquered anything yet. They're still, they are on the bank there of the Jordan, which is maybe not modern day Israel, but it is Israel proper. And so they're in the land, and he's already talking about to them about when they leave the land. Really? Come on, Moses. Do you know us? Oh, yeah, you do. That's why you're telling us this. And he says, when the time arrives when all these things have come upon you, both the blessing and the curse, which I am presenting you, and you are there among the nations, where Yudhe-Vaveh, your Elohim, has driven you, then at last you will start thinking about what has happened to you, and you will return to Yudhe-Vaveh, your Elohim, and pay attention to what he has said, which will be exactly what I'm ordering you to do today, you and your children with all your heart and your being. Start thinking. When you start thinking, how many conversations have I had with people that said, I was just sitting there and I was reading the scripture and I started thinking, why is Saturday not Saturday? Why is Saturday Sunday? Why is it that people are teaching me about obedience, but we're not being obedient? Why is it that Peter's vision had nothing to do with food, but people say that it had something to do with food? And you started thinking, Remember the days that you started thinking? I do. This is a time for me and Kathy coming into Rosh Hashanah Yom Teruah that I was watching TBN, Trinity Broadcasting Network, back in the late '80s, and I'm doing great. We're in a Nazarene church, and we're heading over toward Assembly of God Church, and I start turning the television on, and every this is before we didn't have a DVR, didn't have a VCR, just didn't have any of those R's. All we had was, you got to be here in time to watch it, so adjust my schedule because I'm going to be there watching Joe Good. Wow. It's Joe Good. I give credit to Joe because I turned on TBN and he was teaching about Rosh Hashanah in the coming kingdom. And you know what? I started thinking. And that process began, even though I didn't know that the process was beginning. And it would be 10 years later that in a trip to Israel that I would really start to think in such a way that it would start to make me change. So if our thinking process does not bring us to a changing process, then it's not really thinking, is it? It's just kind of, it's just ideas floating around that we're not grabbing. So we are to embrace this. And we're to embrace it it says, with our whole heart and with our being. Now, this is the same verbiage that's used over in Jeremiah 32. I think it's verse 8. Don't quote me on that one. Just go and read the chapter. Jeremiah 32. That the only time that thank you to Ardell for bringing this out, the only time that it states that he will do anything that I can find, that he will do anything with his whole heart and being, is the restoration of us to his land. Period. So what does he say? He's saying to us that you are to be as serious, as dedicated to your process as he is to your process. That we are to be all in. We're to have everything. We've been talking about this at Life Assembly pretty extensively recently. Some experiences of things that have happened to various people. And it's like, he wants us all in. He doesn't want just a part of us. He doesn't want just our, Shabbat from 2 to 3 or 3 to 5 or whatever. He wants everything. He wants our Sunday, our Monday, everything that we have. Are we willing to give him that? Now, as we turn the page, I'll say something very, very, very delicately, and please keep this in context with how I started this teaching. And it says in chapter 30, verse 10, however, all this will happen only if you pay attention to what Yudhe-Vavhe your Elohim says, so that you will obey his mitzvot and regulations, which are written in this book of the Torah. This is not an anti-Christian statement. This is not an anti-Jewish statement. This is, I believe, a biblical statement. You will only be judged by what is in the Torah and what lines up with the Torah. Why is it that I, as opposed to the Samaritans, those that we would read about in John chapter 4, those that are on Mount Gerizim, the Mount of Blessing today, what is it that differentiates me? That I believe, as my brothers and sisters of Judah believe, that it is the Tanakh, the Torah, the writings, the prophets, that the writings and prophets are as much scripture as the Torah. Why? Because the writings and prophets coincide with and agree with 100% with every word that the Torah says. Now, I can take this for me one step further in that I see the Gospels, the writings of Paul. Yes, I did say the writings of Paul. The problem with Paul is not Paul. The problem with Paul is interpretation of what people think, because they're not thinking right. See, when you start thinking, you got to start thinking right. If it's wrong thinking, you're still going to have wrong conclusions and wrong life. So it's important for us to start thinking right, which means that everything will line up with the Torah, with the first 5 books of Scripture. So when it comes to the Gospels, the writings of Paul, of Peter, of John, the Revelation, everything that's there, it will line up with the words of the Torah. And any writing outside of that is commentary. So bring in Christian commentaries. Can I learn from Christian commentaries? Yes, I do. Someone posted the other day on Facebook that, well, the only book that we should read is the Scripture. Okay. Well, I think that should be the number one book that we read. But to say that I shouldn't read any books outside of that is to say, well, you may not be reading today, you're listening. So, this is my commentary. And if my commentary today is lining up with the Scripture, then maybe you should keep listening. If my commentary is not lining up with the Scripture, I shouldn't. You shouldn't. Just go ahead and turn me off. That's fine. Because I need to take a new look at what I'm doing. So I can use Christian commentators to expound on the Word. I can use Jewish writings to expound on the Word. I can even use some of the other books, such as the Talmud, which is known as the oral Torah. There's the Mishnah, the Talmud. I'm not going to get into what each thing is specifically. I'm not anti any of those books. I'm fine. But see, it says mitzvah and regulations which are written in this book of the Torah. Ladies and gentlemen, this ties us into Yom Kippur. I believe Yom Kippur is a day that we will stand before Him. Our life will be laid out before Him. It will be a day in which the books of our lives are opened, and we will give an account for what we did in this life. There will not be a moment's time, I do not believe, that I will be judged in any way by what a Christian commentator said. I do not believe I will be judged by what a rabbi said, a Messianic leader, a Hebrew roots leader. I will not be judged by any of their words. I will only be judged by the words of the Torah and that which lines up with the written Torah. My opinion. He goes on and says, for this mitzvah which I'm giving you today is not too hard for you. It is not beyond your reach. Okay? It's not too hard for you. But let's face it, it's not too easy either sometimes. Consider that you and I are, not only are we countercultural, we're also counter-religion. You've had the conversation. I have. People, you say, well, it's funny because a lot of times on Sunday mornings I'll go play golf because there's not as many people there. Well, why? I thought you were a pastor. I am, but you're here. I know. How? Well, it's Saturday. Yeah, and the guys are like, oh no, you can't. You don't play on Saturday. They're getting it through their head. They don't understand that. They don't most of them don't have a clue. They're like, so you're Seventh-day Adventist? No. You're Jewish? No. Well, what? What are you doing? And so it's kind of funny. But let's face it, this is not the easiest walk there is. As I said to the youth the other day in Pennsylvania, any dead fish can swim downstream. So this walk is not too hard, but it's not too easy, because anything in life that's worthwhile is probably going to be hard, but he didn't make it too hard. You know, I was talking with someone the other day, and they said how they had they said, well, I eat kosher, but I love shrimp. I said, well, if you're tempted, just buy a heavier fork. It's not too hard, okay? I mean, it's not like you sit down at the restaurant and the waitress comes over and says, no, you're not going to order the chicken parmesan. You're going to order the lobster, and we're going to come over here and make you eat it. It hadn't happened to me at a restaurant, maybe the places you go. So it's not too hard. Let's get that out of our minds. The only thing that's really difficult, actually, is the saying no to ourselves, right? I mean, that's really when it becomes hard, is when we have to say no to ourselves. Verse 19. Okay, it's this is a kind of a fun verse. This one just really struck me today. I call on heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have presented you with life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore, choose life so that you will live, you and your descendants, loving Yud-Heh-Vav Elohim, paying attention to what he says and clinging to him, for that is the purpose of your life. I hadn't read these words in light of our program, Life on Purpose, but I mean, people today, more than ever, it goes back all the way to the beginning, that people were looking for purpose in life. And there hasn't been a person that's ever lived that wasn't trying to find purpose, but it's a matter of people try to find purpose in all the wrong things, in all the wrong places. And the scripture is very clear here. Loving Yud-Heh-Vav, your Elohim, paying attention to what he says and clinging to him, for that is the purpose of your life. Do you want to know why you exist? Why were you born? Why did you have this mommy and this daddy? Why is it that you are breathing right now? Why is it that you're watching me, listening to me right now? Because your desire is, I guess, to cling to him, to love him, to pay attention to him. And I can tell you from someone who has gone in different places in life, those are all, they can fill you for a time, for a season. You know, it's like getting a new car. It smells nice, it looks nice, and then you see some dust on the dashboard. And then you spill something in the seat. And then someone opens their car door up against yours. And it's no longer new. And somehow it's like, that didn't last long enough. You get a new job, you get whatever happens. And you just don't find, well, it's kind of like this. I know this is age old here, but every one of us is born with a void in our lives. Since Adam and Eve in the fall in the garden, every single person that's ever been born has been born with a void inside of them. Adam, I guess we could say Adam and Eve were born with that void, and it was the breath of God that filled the void and gave them life. It was his breath that made them into the animated creatures instead of just the dirt people. When Adam and Eve fell, that breath began to be released from them, creating a void. Well, creation, by its very definition, doesn't just abhor a void, does not just detest a void, but creation itself is designed in such a way that there cannot be a void. And so that void, when you and I come to a place in our life that we desire, that we come to the realization of that void, it is natural for us to begin to try to fill that void. Maybe you're blessed that you were raised by godly parents that could explain to you what that void is and direct you into to the one who could help you to fill that void. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you're like the majority of people, myself included, going to a church but never really having anyone explain to me how that void could be filled. And so you go through life trying to figure out how to fill it. People will try to fill it with entertainment, with sports. It's amazing what people will worship these days. I mean, think about it. If you're out in with other people, and I suggest that you try to find ways to do that. But as you interact with people, it's amazing what people will worship these days. Anything and everything that comes along. I mean, for those of us that grew up in the 70s, do you remember the pet rock? That became almost a place of worship. The Cabbage Patch doll, Elmo. It's crazy what people will worship. And it only can fill you for a certain amount of time. Because the truth is that void has a shape. If you want to know what shape God is, I can tell you. I mean, I can't tell you exactly, but I can give you an idea. The shape of God is exactly like the shape of your void. And if you put something in there besides him, it's like the proverbial round peg in a square hole. It may fit in there, but it's going to leave some gaps around the side. It's never going to fit right. It's never going to be secure. It is only when we come to the realization that the only one that can fill that void that we have is the Almighty himself. Now, chapter 31, this is double Torah portion this week, very, very short ones actually. Chapter 21 is the transition. The transition of Moshe to Yehoshua, Joshua. And I think it's a very important transition for us to consider this right now and where we're at. Moshe says, I'm 120 years old, I can't get around any longer. Yeah, he's about to climb up onto the side of a mountain. I've seen that mountain. It's like, yeah, you're 120 and you're going to climb that mountain? Moshe, come on, give yourself a break. You're getting along a little bit better than you're admitting here. But the truth is that he knew his time was up. And the one thing that is on his mind as he comes to the end of, well, the first thing that's on his mind when he comes to the end of his life and the realization that literally the chapter is about over. The books of Moshe are coming to an end. Am I speaking about the Torah or of his life? Yes. It's time to climb the mountain. It's time for him to call it a day, a lifetime. And one of the things that's the most important to him is handing over those reins to someone else. This is something that speaks to me today very, very loudly. As working with youth, young adults, making sure that the message that I've given the last over 30 years of my life to, that message continues in other people's lives. The journey continues. I mean, I'm still holding out, guys. I'm not 120 yet. In fact, I'm just barely over the hill in those terms. But I'm still holding out that I'm going to make it to that festival of the Feast of Trumpets, and it's going to be not just the dress rehearsal, but the real one. And I may be part of that one, and maybe you will be too. But you know, as time continues on, it's like I can't place all the eggs in that basket anymore. And so I need to start making sure that we need to start to make sure that we are passing that baton over into what I call this rising generation. We need to help them to come forth and to establish. They're going to make mistakes as they begin to take over the reins. They're going to make mistakes. Well, I would rather be there, not to point out their mistakes, but to help them through them, than for it just to be okay, well, he's gone, what do we do now? You know, I saw something the other day that happened. It was like, well, I don't know if, sometimes you need to let people kind of move into their mistakes. I saw it with something kind of almost an irrelevant thing. I'm not going to mention what it was. But they explained to me something they wanted to do in a service. I'm like, I don't know if that's going to work out real well. But it was their idea. They were trying. So why should I discourage that? Why not just go ahead and go, well, yeah, hey, try it out and see. Well, it didn't work out as well as expected. And okay, well, they learned. But it was giving them the opportunity to make the mistakes, the opportunity to learn, and then standing there with a gentle counsel of, maybe you're onto something, but maybe we could do this a little bit better here. Are we going to be a part of this rising generation, or just sit back? This whole thing, not to get political, the whole thing going on in politics today. I mean, really? Shouldn't these people have retired a long time ago? Shouldn't they have said, hey, it's time to get somebody, let's get some new blood in this place. Let's get somebody in here that their blood actually flows. But no, these people are hanging on. Why? Because to them, their whole life is about their own power. It's about them. They don't understand anything else than that. So they have to hold on until the very time that wheeled in, stood up, teleprompter, told what to say, told what to do, told which way to go. I'm not just talking about one party, folks. I'm talking about both. It's the same on both sides of the aisle there. There are people that just need to walk away. Maybe that's true with some people in ministry. There comes a time you got to walk away. There's a time to there's a reason why I think it's in Leviticus, it says that the Levites were to be in the active service of the Levitical priesthood between the ages of 30 and 50. Prior to 30, they were learning. After 50, they were teaching. I think there's maybe ministries out there that should say, it's been fun. It's been a blast. Thank you so much. And it's now time for me to go up and, up to my mountain. I'll be around if you need me for a while, but, I'm going to start heading over toward the mountain. I pray that I have the discernment for that day, personally. Lastly, it says that you're to take these words of this book of the Torah and put it next to the ark with the covenant. So let's get the picture here. We have the ark of the covenant. What's in the ark of the covenant? It is the 10 words. It is the tablets. And then Moshe takes the rest of the Torah of the, we don't know, is this specifically the words of Deuteronomy, Devarim? Is this the all of the Torah? What is it? We're not exactly told here. I tend to believe that only the 10 words were placed, the tablets with the 10 words were placed into the ark, and that everything else was set to the side. And why is this? Is it so that we could never say, well, those words are locked away to the point that I cannot, they're not reachable to me? Those words are sealed away. They're behind lock and key, hidden away in a safe. I can't understand it all. I'm not going to make there's no reason for me to even consider it. Or is it that the priest would go every year on Yom Kippur and see those words sitting before him and come out to the people and say, you and I need to understand God's not just in that box. He's not just in that heavenly realm, but he desires to be in our lives on a daily basis. Let's go back and, as it says, every 7 years, let's open that book. Now, you and I are blessed. I mean, consider this. As in that day, they didn't all have the scripture. Okay, they didn't have their copy they could walk around with. They didn't have their copy they could get up in the morning and read every day. What did they have? They had every 7 years. The Torah was to be read in their hearing. And the Levites were to be the teachers, as we see in the book of Acts, as they would come together from Shabbat to another. But do we really understand and appreciate the accessibility of his word today? That I can have his word here. I've got numerous translations. I've got his word on my phone. It's, everywhere I look in my office, there is a scripture, a resource of some kind that we can pick up. Are we taking it for granted? Are we taking for granted the accessibility of his word? I guess that's a question that each of us need to ask ourselves. But maybe with this coming festival time, we can come back to an appreciation of what he has given us, of the day that he's called us to, of the day that he's called us in, of the purpose that we have, of our ability today to open his word, to reach out to others. And maybe along the way, we could help others to start thinking in such a way that it would change and alter and define their lives. Well, I probably be into Yom Teruah before I speak to some of you. So an early Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Let's see, what else? I think that's about it for right now. So Bezrat Hashem, God willing, see you again next week. And until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.